quiet and don't move.
Nice faces. Nice, easily identifiable faces.
Bette Midler gets kidnapped and her husband doesn't want to pay the ransom, so her kidnappers freak out in Ruthless People, one of 4 new movies we'll review this week on At the Movies, the movie review program. I'm Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune. In addition to Ruthless People, we'll also be reviewing About Last Night with Rob Lowe and Demi Moore in a story about yuppies afraid of falling in love. Also, Big Trouble in Little China, a special effects adventure film set in Chinatown with Kurt Russell as a truck-driving John Wayne. But first, Roger begins with Psycho 3.
Well, after the original Psycho came out in 1960, Anthony Perkins turned down all kinds of offers for a sequel for more than 20 years. And, of course, you couldn't have a sequel without Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates. Then 2 years ago, Perkins agreed to make Psycho 2, which was an okay movie on its own terms, although, of course, it wasn't any comparison to Hitchcock's classic. Now comes Psycho 3, this time directed by Anthony Perkins as well as starring him. And this is a much better movie than Part 2. In fact, if you love the original Psycho, you might want to see this one because this movie is especially interesting in the way it reveals some of the secrets of Norman Bates' obsessive relationship with what remains of his mother. Here's the scene from early in the film.
Well, I'm the manager, and you'd be my assistant, so I guess you'd be assistant manager. You'd get a free room, of course, and work mostly days. I prefer the nights.
Well, I gotta be straight with you, Norm.
Norman.
I'm not looking for anything long-term. I just want to make enough bucks to get the brakes on my car fixed and build up a little stake for L.A. I'm a singer. But I wouldn't mind filling in until you found somebody permanent. I just won't be staying around too long.
No one ever does.
Another visitor to Bates Motel country is a woman journalist who's doing a story on mental patients who have returned to the community, and she wants to get Norman Bates' story.
Aren't you the least bitter about what Lila Lumens tried to do to you?
I understand. My cure couldn't cure the hurt I caused. My return to sanity didn't return the dead. There's no way to make up that loss. The past is never really past. It stays with me all the time. And no matter how hard I try, I can't really escape. It's always there, throbbing inside you, coloring your perceptions of the world and sometimes controlling them.
Norman Bates does kill again in Psycho 3, but the local sheriff remains one of his main supporters, even in this macabre scene.
Well, still no reason to get so riled up and go running off like that. Well, we'll leave you alone now. Again, I'm sorry.
That's not good enough, Sheriff. You just can't let it lie.
I'm letting it lie, and so are you understand? Until I have evidence to the contrary, that young lady and Mrs. Spool are both missing persons cases.
Aren't you going to take him in for questioning or anything? Why don't you drag the swamp? That's where he dumped the last bodies.
Don't tell me my job, Miss Venable.
Well, somebody has to. You're not going to let him go.
Despite all your glib insinuations, I don't have one iota of proof that he's done anything.
I love that moment when he puts the bloodstained ice cube in his mouth and Perkins goes. In fact, Perkins does things with his mouth and eyes better than any other actor in the history of horror films, I think. The key to Psycho 3 is, of course, Norman Bates, Anthony Perkins, and in his first directing effort, Perkins shows that he knows Norman better than anyone else. He doesn't make the movie a freak show, but instead he develops some sympathy for Norman in a perverse way. Here's a man that's driven by demons that we can only imagine and uncertain of his connections with the real world. By this point, Hitchcock's original Psycho has become such an official classic that any movie named Psycho 3 is going to be routinely criticized in comparison with the Hitchcock film. All I have to say is no matter what you call this movie, Anthony Perkins has made a very good, very scary horror film, and in scenes like the one with the ice chest there, one that's very much in the Hitchcock spirit. I liked it.
That's a cute scene. I didn't get scared by the film. I was turned off by some of the violence, and I won't, of course you're not saying it compares with the original. It just sort of laid there for me. I didn't think it was bad. I just didn't care to see it. It didn't interest me. We've talked before about how in some classic movies we don't want to know how the secrets are revealed. That didn't hold any interest for me. Obviously, the speech he makes in the restaurant there about the past guiding one's present and future is obvious. And so the film just sort of sat there, and I ended up just being bored.
Well, if the violence was too much for you, what did you think about the shower scene in the original Psycho? Was that too much for you, too?
No, it wasn't too much for me. That was one of the most shocking things and original things I'd ever seen before.
Well, there's a scene in this movie where somebody gets her neck cut that is just as shocking and in the same way. And I also felt,
but I don't think
context, it's not like Friday the 13th, where they're just throwing it in by the shovelful, but within context and with the character. And there's another scene in this movie.
Yeah, but it's not a classic scene. That scene will not be recalled 20 years from now. 20 years from now.
Okay, 20 years from now, no movies this year are going to be recalled for their classic scenes, probably. We're talking about a scene that stands all by itself, so that's not a valid criticism. Another thing about the movie,
you just asked me if it was a good scene.
I asked you what you said about the violence, and you said the violence was okay in one but not in the other.
That's right.
Which is, if it shocked you in one and didn't shock you in the other, then...
No, obviously there can be violent films where you accept the violence. For example, Halloween is an extremely violent film. I thought was very well done. Psycho was another. This film was not. And there are tons of films that you've routinely disliked that have a lot of violence.
Yeah, but none of them have been quite this well directed. And I think the directing and acting is the whole thing when it comes to violence. There's another scene in this movie where Norman gets a note, presumably from his mother, saying, "Meet me in cabin number 12." And there's a long traveling shot as he walks the whole distance to that room, with the camera showing in his eyes and on his mouth and in his face such a play of emotions that it's absolutely fascinating. I think this is a much better movie than you're giving it credit for.
Well, there's no question that you think it's so, and I disagree. Coming up next, 4 bright and funny young people find it very tough to make a commitment to the opposite sex.
You know what your problem is? Your face.
Yeah, right.
Come on, wise up, man. You're too good looking. Best thing that can happen to you, Danny, is an industrial accident.
Our next film is called About Last Night, and I think it's one of the year's best, telling the story of 4 young single people who find it easier to hide in one-night stands than any other kind of sustained relationship. They meet in the singles bars of Chicago, and there's a lot of bravado and wisecracks as one young woman introduces her roommate to the friend of the guy she's dating.
What do you do?
Me?
Well, yeah, for a living.
I'm a neurosurgeon. You?
I'm a professional boxer. You know much about the fight game?
No.
I'm the heavyweight champion of the world.
Well, it's nice to meet you, champ, but I gotta go.
Wait, come on. One drink's not gonna hurt.
I have something better to do. Deb, I'll meet you at the steam bath tomorrow, 6. Dan.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
Hey. How you doing?
Interesting broad. Where'd she develop her personality? A car crash?
Well, it takes them a long while to hit it off, but the other affair in the movie is almost instantaneous as Rob Lowe asks Demi Moore to move into his apartment, at least part of it.
Debbie, I've been thinking. For the last 2 months, you've been running around town with your undies in a paper bag, and I think maybe you ought to have a drawer over here.
A drawer? A whole drawer? I don't know, Dan. That's a pretty big step. I think you better think about this.
Take the drawer.
Are you sure? Are you positive?
Oh, come on.
Okay, maybe just like a little small one in the kitchen next to the utensils or something. Is that okay?
They're cute, but true love does not come easily, especially for people used to getting their own way and afraid of anything permanent.
It gets in the little cracks in the porcelain, and then I get it on my fingers.
I'll make an effort.
And would you make an effort to please put these wrappers in the trash can? Why don't you just flush them?
What?
Flush them.
You want me to waste 8 gallons of water so that you don't have to look at a piece of paper with the word Tampax written on it? Oh, you didn't even say Tampax. You had to say those wrappers. Does it offend you that much?
No, I just want you to hit the trash can or the toilet, not the floor.
Fine. I'll work on my dunk shot.
But what I'm trying to say to you is you don't need a lot of this. I think you look pretty the way you are.
No. You look great just the way you are. Some of us have to work at it.
Why do you wear all this stuff? To impress your boss?
No.
You know that Bernie says, Joan says you go out with him.
I used to go out with him. It's no big secret, for God's sake.
Oh, it's no big secret. Then how come I didn't know about it?
Well, maybe you never ask.
Okay, I'm asking. Did you sleep with him?
No, Dan, we were bowling partners.
That scene is nicely written because they argue about something at the surface and then finally get to what's really bugging them. Demi Moore and Rob Lowe play that couple. You may remember them from the awful yuppie film last year called St. Elmo's Fire. That film amazingly, was a commercial hit. It was full of paper-thin, phony characters. This movie, About Last Night, is the real thing, full of strong, basically healthy characters who have just one flaw. They're a little bit scared of making a commitment. The script by Tim Kazurinsky and Denise DeClue is bright and funny and true, and the direction by Edward Zwick is clean. It's a pleasure to spend time with these people, including the two other characters we saw at the top of the segment here. They're played by Jim Belushi and Elizabeth Perkins, making a most impressive screen debut. The nicest thing I can say about this movie is I'd like to see a sequel in a few years, picking up these characters and seeing how their lives have turned out.
I loved it too. You think it's one of the year's best, so do I. So we have one of our top 10 already for 1986.
Looks like it.
The amazing thing about this movie was it is a love story about contemporary people, and that is very rare. All of the movies that we've had have all been, in recent years, have seemed to be either genre pictures, or if it's a love story, there's always something wrong with the love, or something doomed about the love, or it's unhappy or self-destructive, or the heavens are frowning on them. These are two ordinary people trying to get through their 23rd, 24th years, meet somebody, fall in love, and try to work out a relationship. And it is so accurately seen and so well played that moment after moment you recognize things from your own life.
This business about the health of the characters is very refreshing because that thing I spotted right away. I'm saying, hey, these are basically happy people. These fall in the range of normal human beings. And so it was a pleasure to see them work it out. Next at the movies, Bette Midler gets kidnapped and her husband thinks that's just great.
Give me your keys. I don't believe this.
Give the bag to Bozo, drop the gun, and put your hands in the air.
Next movie is named Ruthless People, and it stars Danny DeVito in another great role. He's really hot lately after Romancing the Stone and Wise Guys, and this time he surpasses himself as a guy who absolutely cannot stand his wife, played by Bette Midler. The strength of his passion is what makes the movie so funny. There's always something sort of liberating about movie characters who are cheerfully selfish and corrupt and cynical and enjoying it. In this scene, DeVito has lunch with his mistress and talks about his wife.
I want the rest of that money. His money, her money, it's my money. I had to live with that squealing, corpulent little toad all these years. God, I hate that woman. I hate the way she licks stamps. I hate her furniture. And I hate that little sound she makes when she sleeps.
Aren't you scared?
Scared? Hell no. I'm looking forward to it. My only regret, Carol, is that the plan isn't more violent.
Don't you consider throwing a body off a cliff in the dead of night violent?
Nah, she'll be unconscious, knocked out from the chloroform. I'm talking about hands-on involvement.
Hands-on?
But before he gets a chance to murder his wife, she is kidnapped by two people who hate her husband. And here she gets to know her kidnappers and finds out DeVito doesn't want to ransom her.
Mr. Stone pays the ransom. Well, what's the problem? What is the ransom?
It was $500,000.
That shouldn't be a problem.
He complained.
He complained?
And then we dropped our price to $50,000.
Yeah?
He didn't pay.
He didn't pay? So now what?
So now we're dropping our price again to $10,000.
Do I understand this correctly? I'm being marked down?
The plot of Ruthless People is bewilderingly complicated, but that's part of the fun. One of the characters, for example, can only be described as DeVito's mistress's boyfriend. He's kind of a dumb lug who gets everything really wrong with the ransom drop. Everyone in the movie overacts, especially Midler, and that's also part of the fun. Danny DeVito is my favorite part of the movie. With his absolute obsession with his own selfish goals, he sort of reminded me of, for example, Dudley Moore in a movie like Arthur. Judge Reinhold is very good, too. You may remember him as Eddie Murphy's partner in Beverly Hills Cop. He has a kind of boyish innocence about him that makes him an ideal comic kidnapper. You never believe he'll ever harm a hair on Bette Midler's head, and with her hairdressers, who needs to? Ruthless People is silly and preposterous and a lot of fun.
Oh, I think it's a lot of fun, too, and Danny DeVito is marvelous. If I had to complain about the film, I wish there were more of Bette Midler, because I think she's as funny a comedian as he is.
Yes, she is.
And I wish that they had done it this way. Start the movie with their marriage and show how bad it is between them. Then they go to He Wants to Kill Her, because I think if the film has a weak point, it's the playing out of the kidnapping, and it would have been much funnier to see Midler and DeVito go at each other, because he's spectacular and she could have been right with him.
You know what I like so much about DeVito in this movie, thinking about it, is he has sort of a benign evil about him.
Oh, he's cute.
mean, in the scene that we saw, yes, where he's talking to his mistress, how much he hates her. You know, another actor could have given that just the extra edge of real hate or real hostility or real aggression, and then the movie would have been slightly off. But there was just something so angelic about his obsession with his own goals that it makes it funny.
I think he's the average guy, and the average guy would like to be able to let off steam the way Danny DeVito lets off steam.
I thought you were going to say kill his wife.
No. Just let off steam. Coming up next, Black Magic in Chinatown confounds truck driver hero Kurt Russell.
What's going on here? Is this some kind of...
Magic. The darkest magic.
Our next film is called Big Trouble in Little China, and if ever a film overdid its special effects to no purpose, this is it. I was simply exhausted watching this movie and its creatures with glowing vapors emanating from their eyes, mouths, and fingers, and I don't know where else. This was like being in a lightning shower. Kurt Russell does an imitation of John Wayne, playing a truck driver who decides to help out a friend of his in Chinatown, and he winds up in the middle of a tong war. You think this scene you're about to see is wild? There's much more than this in this incredible movie.
Who's that?
Give me a break. Kurt Russell learns that an evil Chinese spirit wants to exchange his blood with a green-eyed Chinese girl in order to make the transition from spirit to human being. Here's that moment.
By destroying this.
Not so fast, gentlemen.
Is it too much to ask, Thunder? Kill him for me!
Won't solve anything, Dave. Too many people around here been dropping like flies already, and where's that getting us, huh? Nowhere, and fast. You know what old Jack Burton always says at a time like this?
Who?
Jack Burton. Me. Old Jack always says, what the hell?
It's a good knife.
And that is really thrilling, and then we get more lightning bolts out of the fingers. This movie must have been influenced by the surprise hit Romancing the Stone, but Kurt Russell is not a dashing hero here, and he certainly is dwarfed by the ridiculous amount of special effects in the film. This movie made me very sad, because I think, to a large degree, special effects are still replacing relationships and dialogue in so many American movies.
That's what I missed. I was looking at the special effects and appreciating them to an extent. The movie was directed by John Carpenter, the same man who made The Thing and Escape from New York, which were also very top-heavy with special effects.
Yes.
And yet, eventually I said, where's the story?
Yes.
Why am I supposed to care about these characters? And I didn't have any answer to that. It was just one special effect after another. Right at the beginning I thought, hey, it might be clever. At last, a high-tech, high-budget spoof of Kung Fu. But by the end of the movie...
It was not a spoof.
By the end of the movie I was just saying, you know, what am I going to have to sit through next? It was too much. It was just too much on the screen for one movie.
Somebody got carried away with themselves. Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed on this show. We split on Psycho 3. Roger thought it was a very effective thriller in its own right, but I thought it sort of went flat. A big agreement, though, on About Last Night. We both think this comedy about singles kids in Chicago is one of the best films of the year. And 2 more thumbs up for Ruthless People, with a great performance by Danny DeVito. Finally, 2 thumbs down for Big Trouble in Little China, which has a lot of special effects, too many special effects, and never engages us in the plot.
So we both laughed a lot at Ruthless People, and I like Psycho 3, but the one I want to emphasize is About Last Night.
Yeah, this is the best one this week.
Is such a wonderful movie, and we've seen a lot of Rob Lowe, but I've never seen him this good before. Demi Moore had never even really made an impression on me until this film, and now suddenly such a wonderful 3-dimensional performance. I was really impressed by it.
This is the first time I've ever liked Jim Belushi on film. I always thought he went wild. This film is really good. Elizabeth Perkins, we like everybody associated with this.
We like everybody in the film, we like the film, and that's it for this week. We like to end on a little up note there. Next week, we'll be back with more reviews, including the rock star Prince in his new film, Under the Cherry Moon, and Robin Williams and Peter O'Toole in a holiday resort movie called Club Paradise. Until then, we'll see you at the movies.